Well, right. I think we can start. We are among us in, well, about 80 or just a little above 80 participants. So I think it's a right moment to start. Therefore, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, first of all, a very warm welcome to all of you, to our speakers and to all participants joining us today virtually, to all of you who decided to take part in this webinar, well, quite still early in the morning, so hopefully with a cup of a tea or maybe strong coffee to still keep you awake. My name is Tomasz Poprawka, and I'm a director of the Polish Science Contact Agency of Polish Academy of Sciences here in Brussels. And together with my colleagues at the Polish Institute Brussels, we are pleased to co-host this webinar for you. We are delighted to gather today such wonderful speakers who agreed to join us for the Cultural Heritage in Digital Age event. This webinar is a unique chance to present and discuss opportunities and challenges that lay ahead of us in fostering the involvement of researchers, innovators, and other relevant actors in the process of digitalization of European cultural heritage. As a matter of fact, and in a spirit of synergy, we are meeting today among a variety of stakeholders. Among the registered participants, we saw approximately 50% of those representing R&I institutions, such as research centers, universities, academies of arts. Almost 1/4 of participants can be linked to various institutions of culture, like museums, libraries, as well as theaters, opera houses, and philharmonics. On top of it, we are very delighted to have among us and among online participants to this meeting, a broad representatives of the national, regional, and local stakeholders, like a number of NGOs, enterprises, and governmental authorities. Today, we will have a chance to get an up-to-date and a first-hand information from various experts in field representing European Commission, European networks, universities, research centers, and libraries. With such a truly inspiring speakers, we will, yet again, in the spirit of joining us of synergy, we will engage in a discussion that bringing together different EU programs, mainly Horizon Europe, but as well Creative Europe and Digital Europe programs, as well as other initiatives. The event in itself is a good example of a synergistic approach. While PolSCA office is linked to research and innovation activities, our colleagues at the Polish Institute of Brussels are definitely much closer to culture and creative communities. With this, I pass the microphone to my colleague Agnieszka from the Polish Institute Brussels. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure today to say a few words on behalf of the Polish Institute Brussels to welcome you to the webinar about cultural heritage in the digital age. Because you already made the effort to register for the webinar, I assume you are fully convinced about the importance of digital transformation in the cultural heritage area and ways of supporting such processes. We know that digitalization of cultural heritage and ensuring online accessibility are essential for the promotion of cultural heritage. And since the start of the pandemic, we are witnessing a boom in online culture. The COVID pandemic has led to the disruption of the sector's traditional way of working, making the digital transformation more relevant than ever for cultural institutions. Institutions devoted to the preservation of audiovisual works have seen a massive increase in traffic, like Minateka, the catalog of the Polish National Film Archive, offering feature films and documentaries. Some opera houses and concert halls, as well as some museums, have been able to move most of their activities online, like the Digital Repository Museum of the National Museum in Warsaw. But of course, there are also other stories where institutions from the same categories simply closed for the duration of pandemic and limited their online presence to the minimum. At the Polish Institute, we saw it very well as we cooperate with such institutions in Poland and in Belgium in the field of culture and heritage. It is essential to ensure that the cultural heritage sector is equipped with the best tools, resources, and knowledge to fully exploit the potential of digital transformation. I'm sure that today's event will provide these tools, knowledge, and skills. I now give the floor to our special guest, Professor Dorota Walczak-Drama from the UOB University in Brussels, and wish you a very productive meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really glad and happy to be here with you in front of my PC. Ladies and gentlemen, dear organizers, also dear speakers in today's webinars, it's a really incredible occasion to say a few words in front of you today and share with you a brief reflection on literature in the context of preserving activities. It's not easy in 5 minutes, but I'll try. And literature, world literature, which encompasses a great diversity of literary achievements, is a part of our common human heritage and an essential part of European identity, of which we can be proud. When our children are proficient in cybernetics, writes Marian Pankowski, who is a bit a pretext also to this meeting. So the first step, the first moving idea. He wrote about a possible future showing in the skies. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we do. Go
okay.
on.
I've heard something strange. So Marian Pankowski writes about a possible future in the poem Spring is Here, as in all his work, the necessity of preserving the memory of the painful and difficult wartime past, but also of the joyful liberation of imagination, of the expanded boundaries of human possibilities of expression. And as a professor at the Free University of Brussels, it is not uncommon for me to take a fascinating trip, fantastic voyage back in time, observing the literary paths that from the roots of our civilization lead from orally transmitted stories, myths and legends to today's cybernetics, poetry and collaborative novels, from the Homeric epic form, Iliad and Odyssey in the rhythm of hexameter, and Dante's La Divina Commedia, to Hugo Claus' Her Verdict van de België, or Michael Matisse's graphic novel La Ville Rouge, written with a coal and the author's blood, or still the International Slam of Transpoesie or Passaporta Festival, the traces of the consolidation with mnemonics, images, cascade composition of the book within a book form, biometric data or a soundtrack, visible and audible, verifiable and tangible. In a community of texts, some authors preserve the memory of others. Goethe of Voltaire, Pushkin of Mickiewicz, Hülle of Hrabal, Tokarczuk of Proust. The series of references could be long and span centuries because as Descartes used to say, reading good books is like talking to the greatest people of the past. Or as the Nobel Prize winner from 1996, Wisława Szymborska used to say, reading books is the most beautiful pastime that mankind has invented. As well, and one wants to preserve and repeat such experiences of joyful activity. Szymborska, in her poem entitled Tombstone, also writes with her usual dose of humor about the future reader, so computerized, so brilliant that he takes out an electronic brain from his briefcase and dreams over her grave. And the joy in the poem, the joy of writing, authors remind us of the causative power of the pen and the power of preserving our individual and collective worlds. I quote, Not a thing will ever happen unless I sow. Without my blessing, not a leaf will fall. Not a blade of grass will bend beneath that little hoof's full stop. Is there then a world where I rule absolutely on fate? A time I bend with chains of signs? An existence become endless at my pending? The joy of writing, the power of preserving, revenge of a mortal hand. This is a poem in translation of Claire Kavanagh and Stanisław Barańczak. And well, literary scholars are gradually expanding the territory of history and theory to include literary deconstruction, comparative literature, literary geography, and on ideas, the sharing of resources, the care taken to perpetuate them. I quote, "It is necessary to translate, to comment, to publish, to print, to reflect, to stereotype, to distribute, to announce, to expound, to read to others, to disseminate, to give to all, to give cheaply, to give at a cost, all poets, all philosophers, all thinkers, all those who create from the greatness of the soul," wrote Victor Hugo. Today we have this possibility while preserving scientific savoir-vivre and copyright, thanks to the digitalization process. Wider access to learning, knowledge and pleasure does not mean that the precious clay and stone tablets, papyrus, parchment and paper form of book or other achievement will disappear. Libraries may take many forms, but there are, as Margaret Yourcenar writes in Hadrian's Memories, one of the best forms of reproduction of human thought. When they are freely accessible, they are a formidable and peaceful tool against inequality and social injustice. They are a guarantee for the survival of values and ideals, and paradoxically, also for our concrete material and cultural resources. They are, and this guaranteed being means perhaps the most important will and legacy for future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Professor Walczak. This was very sort of heartwarming and inspiring as the literature and poetry can be. So thank you very much for this opening speech, where you touched upon, I think, something very important, which is this power of preserving that you have mentioned. And I think this is why we are here today. So to enable that, so to make it happen and to make it possible for us and for the generation that will come after us. From this very inspiring speech, I will have to take you back to this, well, digital reality and the meeting that we are in. And I will just, before we move to the first panel, I will just give you a few sort of housekeeping rules. So you have noticed already that most of you are muted. And this is for the sake of the presenters and the discussion, so not to interfere. However, we encourage all of you to ask questions and to engage in the discussion with the speakers and with our guests through a chat option. So you can ask your questions as we will be moving through the panels. What would be very useful if you could address and indicate the speaker to whom you would like to ask a particular questions, as we will have a short Q&As after each session, so that we know as the moderators, or most moderators who will lead the sessions, that the question is directed at a certain person. Without any further ado, I think we can move on with the program and to start with the first panel session that will be led by Professor Mariusz Dzięglewski, leader of the InLab Research and Innovation Center at the Pedagogical University of Krakow. The panel is entitled Opportunities and Challenges in Digitalization of Cultural Heritage. And it will be also with the participation of the guest representing the European Commission, the Directorate General of Research and Innovation, as well as Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, and the representative of the DARIA project, which stands for Digital Research Infrastructure in the Arts and Humanities. Now I will give the floor to Professor Dzięglewski, who will introduce you to participants of this panel. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Our session is focused on opportunities and challenges for digitalization of cultural heritage. We will have three excellent speakers. Each of them will provide us with a unique perspective on the topic. At the end, as it has been said, we will have some time for questions and answer. I would like to encourage you once again to type your questions using chat function just during the presentation. Our first speaker is Marita Kayamanidou. Marita is the Deputy Head of Unit Cultural Heritage and First Societies at the European Commission, DG for Research and Innovation, and she's in charge of policy for R&I on cultural heritage in Horizon Europe Framework Program for R&I. As Marita has to leave us at 10, I will read your questions to Marita just after the presentation. Marita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Dzięglewski. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If I can share my, yes, I would like to share my presentation just to guide you. I'm very happy and thank you very much for inviting me to this important event, which is an opportunity for me to develop the research and innovation policy on cultural heritage and its digitization, as it is settled in Horizon Europe and more particularly in Cluster 2. For those who are familiar with Horizon Europe, research and innovation on cultural heritage, arts, and the creative and cultural industries is for the first time an earmarked policy area, and it is part of Cluster 2. In Pillar 2, it is in red color. This is the cluster Culture, Creativity, and Inclusive Society, one of the 6 clusters of Pillar 2, which means impact-oriented research and innovation. For the next 7 years, Cluster 2 will invest a considerable budget of 2.28 billion euro for the 3 activities, which will be developed in the frame of this program. And for the first 2 years, 2021-2022, the work program will contain activities beginning in 2027 and the lower in 2021. As I told you, we have 3 implementation areas in Cluster 2, the second one being the European cultural heritage and the cultural and creative industries. Cluster 2 focuses on goals and priorities of the European Union on safeguarding and promoting cultural heritage, as well as to respond to multifaceted vision, enhances environmental, cultural, economic, and community sustainability, creates employment, and generates income from cultural assets. It stimulates enterprise development and fosters private investment. Equally important, cultural heritage contributes to the international attractivity of the European Union, its values, and its quality of life. The new policy supports a lot of challenges which are linked to climate change, pollution, natural or man-made disasters or looting, and research and innovation will be priority developed on these aspects. The protection and safeguard of the cultural heritage requires the development and use of digital technologies, as well as a wider access to cultural resources of digital cultural heritage. Finally, the European cultural and creative industries have not sufficiently managed to translate their creativity into innovations, nor to increase satisfactorily their international competitiveness. And this requires specific sectorial research and innovation approaches, and this is the third pillar of the new policy on innovative and creative cultural heritage. I will give you some few examples of the digital dimension in different activities which will be developed in 2021 and 2022. One of the activities, of course, applied to preserving cultural heritage with advanced digital technologies. Research and innovation actions are envisaged to promote extended digitization so that collections, artifacts, and monuments can be preserved, restored, and safeguarded in a sustainable and user-friendly way. Digitization practices should develop digital facilities that will allow building shared infrastructures, including with the use of services from cloud. They should provide specialized trainings and courses and facilitate knowledge and know-how exchange to address real needs in the field of cultural heritage. Projects should thus increase the use of existing tools and cutting-edge technologies or develop new ones according to the needs. And virtual and augmented reality might be used on this purpose, as well as artificial intelligence, to reduce access and knowledge limitations to cultural assets. Another activity which will be developed in the frame of 2021-22 work program applied to new ways of participatory management and sustainable financing of museums and other cultural institutions in Europe. Research and innovation activities in this context should explore ways to mitigate the challenges that museums and other cultural institutions, as well as the entire ecosystem around them, are facing in terms of sustainable financing and management of their activities, including the social and economic impact of the coronavirus-19 pandemic. They should provide methods and models to sustainably finance cultural institutions, while they should ensure equal and wide access to culture, heritage, and cultural goods. Emphasis should be put on new ways of participatory cultural management to help museums and other cultural institutions to become fully embedded in cities' life. A digital strategy should be developed as part of this new management and financing model, including sustainable ways of sharing knowledge and facilities to communicate through and about objects and collections of both tangible and intangible cultural heritage and arts. Close interaction with stakeholders who are related to this large ecosystem should be ensured, as well as with local, regional, and national communities and authorities, and of course, cooperation with the research institutions and the cultural and creative stakeholders in the frame of activities which will be implemented here. Another activity which is very much interesting applies to the safeguard of endangered languages in Europe. And the intention here is the creation of a European language preservation ecosystem, in particular with the establishment of a set of guidelines for revitalizing endangered languages in Europe and the setting up of a comprehensive website. The exchange of best practices and collection of endangered language resources and tools should be made widely available. A set of identified guidelines should be validated by the use of existing cases of language revitalization. Finally, another example of digitization of cultural heritage applied to an activity which invests on the understanding of the techniques of traditional artifacts, encompassing the full range of materials like stone, ceramic, porcelain, metal, wood, and some other. Research and innovation activities should target at reproducing traditional artifacts, traditional techniques, and know-how by combining them with new digital and other cutting-edge technologies. Research and innovation initiatives should identify new areas of application and markets for professions, combining traditional crafts with cutting-edge technologies, including digital. Proposals should develop methodologies to combine these two approaches and to bring together all stakeholders concerned by these activities. Some other activities with strong digital components are included in the work program of the first 2 years, as well as the subsequent ones, and they are part of this new policy. Mitigation of effects of climate change and natural hazards on cultural heritage, including the coastal and undersea cultural heritage, the protection of artifacts and cultural goods from anthropogenic threats, looting, and illicit trafficking, with marking technologies, including digital ones, the new European Bauhaus for a greener and fairer way of life, for sustainability and quality architecture, the increasing of potential of the international competitiveness of the European filmmaking and music industry, and some other more. In very concrete terms, we have the timetable for implementation of these 2 first years is that most probably in the second half of May, we will have the first call for proposals for 2021, which will be launched with a deadline 9th of September 2021. That of 2022 will be launched late in 2021, and they will have a 3 to 4 month duration. Some very interesting websites for information on Horizon Europe and Cluster 2, and in particular Cultural Heritage. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marita. And now we have a few minutes for questions. I haven't seen questions on our chat, but I have been sent one question. Maybe I will copy it into our chat if you don't mind. The question is, how are you thinking about implementing the integration of cultural elements across all parts of the program, rather just in the given space in Cluster 2? I will copy this question to our chat. Few minutes for your answer, Marita.
Oh, yes. As I told you, Cluster 2 is impact-oriented activity, which means we will not promote the so-called academic research. The place for that knowledge-driven research is in European Research Council. This means that in the project, all relevant stakeholders should participate, and they will bring obligatorily these cultural and creative elements. The topic, for example, I developed for museums. Museums should be there because we speak about their own participatory management and financing, as well as research institutions, as well as the ecosystem which sustain museums and cultural institutions. And of course, they will work on advanced methods, including in case by case, the cloud use and services or financial instruments. Cultural elements will be implicitly in the project. If they are not, the projects will suffer in the evaluation.
Thank you very much. I have just one more question about the idea of safeguarding languages, endangered languages. This is, I think, something which might be very interesting for many institutions. I will copy this question here as well. The question is simply, I was just wondering what kind of digitalization projects might be funded under the area of safeguarding endangered languages. We are talking about intangible cultural heritage in this case.
And we have worked also with some international organizations like UNESCO, who are very active on that. But in Horizon 2020, we have also implemented projects on endangered languages. We are going to use at the very first stage research and innovation results which have been produced up to now. And the intention here is to set up a interactive website to allow communities which are using the so-called endangered languages to discuss together with the research institutions to set up a methodology how to safeguard, how to educate the next generations, how to ensure a better use of these languages. The plurality in European Union is one of the very big richnesses. And in the next steps, we will put an accent on research and innovation for new needs on this domain.
Thank you very much. And very, very short one last question. Once again, I will copy it. I noticed that not everyone can see the question, but now it should be okay. The question is about cluster 2. Once again, it is aimed at developing digital facilities. This is the quote, in a user-friendly way. The question is, could you elaborate on this topic? What is the place of user in the expected digitalization project? Does it mean the same as user-centered approach to digital facilities? How do you understand it?
Yes, it is. It changes with regard to each and every activity. For example, if I take the protection of cultural artifacts and cultural goods from anthropogenic reasons and looting. In this case, what we wanted to do as a proactive measure, we would like to proceed with marking of these cultural artifacts. This marking might be done with different ways. One of them, and very efficient, is the digital way. Marking is not enough. We should be in a position when we have looting of cultural goods to identify these cultural goods which have been miswritten, let's say. And in this case, we should also, in these projects, set up technologies of identification of marked cultural goods, which are not very heavy. We don't need a synchrotron to identify something which is marked by one methodology. And they are, as much as possible, easy, friendly user, easy to be used by appropriate services. This is just one example. I can develop much more, but I have a very limited timing.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation and answer for the question. So I think we can let you go for your jobs. And now the next speaker is Maciej Hoffman. For the last 6 years, Maciej has been working as policy officer at the European Commission, where he is responsible for managing initiatives related to the rule of culture in cities and regions. He's responsible as well for access to culture via digital means, as well as support to cultural and creative sectors. Maciej will focus on opportunities for funding of cultural heritage plus digital project across many EU actions. I think especially on the Creative Europe program. Maciej, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Dzięglewski, for this introduction, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here, and also grateful to the organizers for the opportunity to speak to you. I have prepared the slides for you as well, so I hope you'll be able to see it in a minute. Hope that's the case now. Yeah, so in my presentation, essentially, I wanted to give you a slightly different angle than Marita, since I come from Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture and the Culture Policy Unit. We are in fact the part of the Commission that is in charge of the putting in place the EU culture policy collaboration. And the first thing that needs to be flagged here is that culture as such is not the direct EU competence. The role of the European Union is in fact to support member states, to support regions, to support cities in addressing different challenges that exist in relation to culture. Of course, it's also the question of valorizing cultural diversity and different European cultures, but in a way, Brussels and the European Union, and of course the European Commission, is not imposing anything on member states. But what I wanted to essentially tell you in this context is how culture heritage fit in this EU strategic framework. Of course, I wanted to say a few words about Europeana. It's a different part of the European Commission that is responsible for this initiative, but I think it's very important to mention it. Then I will move to indeed Creative Europe program, and also mention some other funding tools for culture. And last but not least, I also wanted to say a few words in relation to the COVID-19 situation and the challenges that culture sectors are currently facing, and also what the European Commission is doing in this respect, and what possibly digital solutions can bring to the table. So without further ado, let me move to the first point. So the strategic framework for EU culture cooperation. On the one hand, of course, the European Union and the European Commission acknowledges the important role of culture and cultural heritage as such, so for its intrinsic value, but it's also very important to look at culture more broadly, to look at what culture can bring to societies and economies. And this is very much reflected in this big strategic documents on culture from the European Union. So first of all, the new European Agenda for Culture, which speaks about social and economic dimension of culture. It also looks at heritage and digital tools and how they can help culture and creative sectors. It's one of the dimensions included in this document. So later you will receive the presentation. So of course you will be able to read through these documents. And I also very much encourage you to do it, because I think that this is something also quite relevant for whichever applying for funding in the future, that you also know this context and you can possibly link to it. Second document I wanted to mention here, Council Work Plan for Culture 2019-2022. These are the documents that are adopted every few years by the Council, so essentially by the representatives of European Union member states' culture ministries, that decide together on the Commission on priorities, on what the European Union should focus when we think about cultural cooperation. And in there, of course, you can also find quite a lot of actions related to culture and digital. And here's one example, a specific action that was included in the work plan, a working expert group of member states and the Commission on understanding digital audiences. So how actually cultural institutions should approach the topic of audiences, how they can reach out to their digital audiences, how they can create content that is also interesting and engaging for people who use and who access culture online or through digital tools. Last but not least, I wanted to mention the European Year of Cultural Heritage 2018, and those of you who have been following European Union cultural policy are quite familiar with this initiative. This was a big thematic year devoted to the richness and diversity of European cultures. Of course, it was a year of celebration, but there was also a very, very concrete outcome of that year, the political outcome of that year, in the form of the European Framework for Action on Cultural Heritage, adopted by the European Commission in December 2018. And if you look at the specific actions which are included in this framework, you will also find quite a lot of initiatives related to digitization of cultural heritage or culture and digital access. And also quite a lot of them, in fact, related to what was back then being financed by Horizon 2020, so the predecessor of Horizon Europe program that Maria spoke about. So this kind of gives you this policy context. And again, I would very much encourage you to read about these documents, to see kind of and realize what's the strategic vision that the European Union has on the role of culture. Now moving to Europeana, as I said, it's actually different part of the European Commission. These are the colleagues based in Luxembourg in so-called DG Connect. So this is really the technology part of the European Commission. So Europeana is essentially, for those who don't know it, a big digital library of Europe that has an aim of also digitizing and putting together items and digital heritage from all across European institutions. So for the time being, more than 58 million digitized items are available on Europeana websites. Of course, this is different types of media and different types of collections. Here is also a link in my presentation, so later on you can read more about how these initiatives are actually related to what colleagues in DG Connect and this other service of the Commission are doing. This is also very much a part of broader policy work that they have, and also a specific expert group that they lead together with member states representatives on digitizing cultural heritage and Europeana specifically. But what's of course very important is to make sure that these archives that they're digitized, they are actually given a second life, that they are actually reused and kind of put out there for broader audiences. So here's an example I like very much. A video game called 11/11 Memories Retold. It was a video game developed a few years ago about the First World War. It was quite a commercial success, let's say. But what's interesting is that the creators of the game, French and British animation studios, actually use the archive materials available in Europeana collections. So you can also read later the full story on to Maria. I can kind of call you what's in store, but we don't have the calls out yet, so it's more of a sneak peek on what you can expect, and also links to the previous program. I would say there isn't that big of a change when it comes to what Creative Europe aims to do. The idea of this program is to support the broadly understood cultural and creative sectors of the European Union, and by this I mean both market and non-market oriented cultural sectors, which means it can be equally, on the one hand, for cultural or audiovisual SMEs, but on the other hand, for public institutions, museums, heritage institutions, and so on. The good news for the upcoming financial perspective until 2027 is that the budget has been considerably increased. So we have more than 2.4 billion euros for these years. There are these three strands that are available in Creative Europe. The culture part is quite interesting. Here are some examples you can discover later on. Statistics for you, showing you that Creative Europe cooperation projects actually finance initiatives across different domains. This is the statistics for the last call of the previous program from last year. You can see that there are all the domains from theater up to heritage, and also through digital arts. Here is also a broad overview of how these topics kind of fit in. So again, if we think about digital for culture and Creative Europe, it can really link to kind of digitization, but also digital services in music, accessing online collections, digital skills, you name it. So there's quite a big overview. In my slides, you will also find a link to the database of projects from Creative Europe. So I also discover you to look for yourselves. But of course, Creative Europe is just a tip of the iceberg. So Maria discussed Horizon Europe, but there is also a number of other EU programs that can possibly benefit culture. So of course, Digital Europe, InvestEU, structural funds, and quite a lot of them. So good news that I have for you here is that from this year in the Commission, we actually started working on specific interactive tools we want to put in place to inform culture and creative operators about opportunities that can exist for them in different programs. Creative Europe is quite well covered because there is a network of national contact points, Creative Europe desk, that inform about the program, but maybe it's not always the case for these other programs, and not always the culture and creative sectors operators actually consider that these programs could be relevant for them. We want to change it. So this year, later on in coming months, we'll be launching this interactive website that will be informing culture operators about the opportunities. And my last point, of course, now in the Commission, we're very much operating in relation to this COVID-19 situation and the difficulties that this brought to culture and creative sectors. But there is, of course, some ways in which European Union can help and the digital tools can help. So I wanted to also share with you as a last point this Creatives Unite platform. This is the platform that was launched in May last year and regroups different opportunities and initiatives put in place both by public but also private operators to help and assist culture and creative sectors during these difficult times. So I really encourage you to discover. It's a database of small articles and initiatives. You can find quite a lot of them are linked to also digitization and cultural heritage. So this is definitely a good place to look for information. So thank you very much. You know, it was a very brief presentation, but I had to keep track of the time. As a last message, I would like to really encourage you to stay up to date with what's happening in Brussels and in the European Commission in relation to culture. The easiest way to do it is to follow Creative Europe on Facebook and Twitter, on social media, and the colleagues in charge are posting a lot of information about different opportunities, calls, and initiatives that you can join. And of course, there is also the link to the website of the Commission on Culture, as well as my email address. So, you know, I'll be happy to also get in touch with you later in the future if you have any questions about what you have just heard. So thank you very much, and thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Maciej. I think Maciej provided us with very good example of reuse practice because, as we know, this is an issue in digitalization of cultural heritage field. Our next speaker is Maciej will address your questions after the last presentation, and so I would like to encourage you once again to type your questions on our chat. Our last speaker is Tomasz Parkoła. Tomasz is head of digital libraries and knowledge platforms department at Poznań Supercomputing Network Center in Poland. He manages research and development teams responsible for digital humanities, especially digital humanities infrastructure, products and services for digital libraries and cultural heritage. Tomasz will focus on key challenges of digitalization from the perspective of ITC, so it is one more unique perspective. So the perspective of ITC and R&D areas. Tomasz, the floor is yours. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. So just give me a moment to start my presentation, and thank you for this introduction. Can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Not yet. It's still kind of working. Here we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So as already mentioned, I work at PSNC. PSNC is Poznań Supercomputing and Networking Center, affiliated to the Institute of Bioorganic Chemistry of the Polish Academy of Sciences, and it is an ICT-focused R&D center and digital infrastructure provider. So PSNC is involved in many R&D projects related to digital transformation, and these projects cover various domains, including cultural heritage and digital humanities. And I personally, as already mentioned, I lead a department that works with these two domains. So in my presentation, I would like to give you another perspective, an overview of the challenges in digitization from our, ICT R&D perspective, or you could also say from digital infrastructure provider perspective. Let's first see how PSSC contributes to the cultural heritage and digital humanities. So on the slide, I indicated three main areas of our activities. First, we provide production level solutions for digitization and preservation of cultural heritage sector. Second, we maintain and develop Polish national metadata aggregator that is connected to Europeana. And third, we are involved in DARIA EU and DARIA PL research infrastructures, and here we build tools and solutions for digital humanities and art. And now the question is, how do we identify those, challenges, and how do we innovate in this context? Well, it's mainly because there are concrete needs from the users, or you could also say stakeholders. So there is a challenge, an issue, a problem that our stakeholders face, and we want to solve it. But in order to identify the real needs, we have to really focus on the stakeholders, right? So now the question is, who is involved in the actions that try to meet those challenges in digitization? And even if this sometimes may seem to be obvious, it's still crucial to really clarify that and keep it in mind. So now let's see how do we see it. So first, these are, the cultural heritage institutions that provide data and want their data to be useful for their users. And in fact, it is very much aligned with their mission to promote and disseminate knowledge. Second, we have stakeholders that need cultural heritage data and want to process and work with it. And of course, in our context, it is digital humanities community or artists and so on. And last but not least, of course, the third group is related to those who can deliver digital technology that will meet, those expectations of cultural heritage and digital humanities. So it is, from my perspective, it's computer science community represented, for instance, by us, by PSNC. So in a summary, these three communities or stakeholders have in fact a common goal, right? And to deliver effective digital transformation in the context of cultural heritage. And this is why, the basic thing is cultural heritage, digital humanities, and computer science should collaborate closely together to really deliver that. And now coming to more concrete, so to say, from my perspective, the main challenge in digitization is really to collaborate towards reuse of consolidated datasets. It means that we need ways to produce relevant and good quality datasets. Once we have the datasets, we need to seek ways to consolidate and interlink them so that new discoveries and large-scale approaches are possible. And as a result, in fact, we enable reuse and exploitation of these data. So let's have a closer look at these three areas. When it comes to data sets, we have to first understand that cultural heritage data are in fact humanities data. So we have to work towards using cultural heritage collections as data sets, and if necessary, transform those collections into data sets for digital humanities research. In this context, we need to create relevant digitization workflows that produce data which meet digital humanities expectations. So we have to also be aware of what is needed by the researchers and curate the collections to provide necessary information. For instance, good quality OCR for search, or even better quality OCR for NLP tasks. And finally, although we should investigate, of course, 3D or 4D technologies, we still have to bear in mind two-dimensional digitization, which, in many areas still needs improvements and new solutions. For instance, already mentioned OCR or poor quality OCR or legacy OCR that is there in already available content online. And of course, to use the data, we still need to properly approach the IPR aspects and stimulate also the data openness via initiatives like RightStamp.org or within heritage data reuse charters. So in principle, we have to be able to clearly respond to a question whether one can use specific data sets for one's work, both in terms of IPR as well as data quality, usability, and also applicability. The second area is related to data interlinking, consolidation, and aggregation. And we have, data available in thousands of repositories across Europe, but this cannot be used in large-scale scenarios without aggregation or interlinking consolidation. Even in such simple scenarios like full-text search, for instance, or full-text analysis. So some of the work is already happening within Europeana, but there is still a lot to do with data quality and data interlinking. The good news is that the focus is shifting from quantity to quality, because in fact, it is only the quality that can deliver the value to the researchers. There are also clear views from the initiatives like Time Machine on data consolidation or knowledge graphs, and those you can find in relevant Time Machine roadmaps. And there are also actions in this regard in the digital humanities community itself. For instance, the community SSH Social Sciences and Humanities community is working towards SSH Open Marketplace, being SSH part of EOSC. So the marketplace integrates tools, resources, research workflows, and publication useful in social sciences and humanities research. And there is, of course, EOSC itself and Fair Data movement to stimulate all of that. And let's move to the our final, so to say, slide. So finally, our challenge is to also use a few. There is, of course, AI movement. There is an issue of authenticity or trustworthiness of the data, and maybe blockchain could help with that. We also have to work on data analytics approaches and build, so to say, knowledge graphs that could help with new discoveries. There are also solutions like interactive computing, for instance, Jupyter notebooks that are already in use to some extent and seem to be promising in data analytics. We should also look at intangible cultural heritage, which is to some extent already addressed, but there are, of course, areas to improve. For instance, active fault groups need proper infrastructure and also awareness in terms of preservation of their activities and recreation or maintenance of the local tradition. Without these actions, in some sense, we will lose part of our European history or tradition. And of course, with more and more data available, we have to think about new processing model like edge computing, for instance, in terms of preservation or data transformation. And this concludes my presentation. So thank you for your attention, and I guess we will have a moment for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are perfect in time. And now we have 10 minutes for questions and answers. I guess it is quite difficult to even ask the question because our presentations are really concise, and probably it is easier for you to ask the question after they are published, the presentation are published, so that you can reflect on them a little bit. So I guess there would be no problem with contacting directly with our speakers. I think all of them would simply respond. So if you don't mind, I have a few questions which are not just only my own question, but they are questions, but they are a part of debate we have in the different with different researchers and stakeholders. So the first question would be to Maciej, which I think is quite interesting for many of us. You mentioned an interactive map-based interface for cultural heritage, and this is something which probably many people are interested in. Could you elaborate a little bit about this idea? How is this solution supposed to be used by digital audience?
Okay, I'm expecting it's the question about the Joint Research Center map-based cultural heritage map, right? The one I showed on the slide in relation to yeah. So this was essentially an idea from our side to kind of put on the map and maybe also better valorize a number of different EU cultural initiatives that exist. Actually, I imagine you might be quite familiar with some, for instance, of the EU prizes for Europa Nostra Heritage Awards or European Heritage Label that actually valorizes both tangible and intangible European cultural heritage. The idea was to essentially use a kind of map of Europe and allow people to discover it in this interactive way, because we also realized that there is sometimes this communication issue, I would say, with some of these European initiatives. So that was also a way of doing it together with Joint Research Center as one of the outcomes essentially of the European Year of Cultural Heritage. So yeah, we have this, I mean, I think it was also mentioned partially in the slides of Maria, Joint Research Center that also works in large part on kind of local dimension of culture. They have this, for instance, Culture and Creative Cities Monitor, which is a self-assessment tool, which is also a map-based tool, in fact, for cities and regions across Europe, where they see how they can actually score in relation to kind of cultural vibrancy and cultural development of their local context. So it was also partially based on this kind of maps that Joint Research Center is using. But yeah, essentially the idea was to allow Europeans to discover what are the important European heritage assets or heritage items or intangible heritage as well, close to where they are, so really to put this into the kind of geographical dimension of Europe. So I hope it answers your question.
Thank you. And probably many participants from different institutions would be interested in realistic deadlines for calls for applications to Creative Europe program. Do you have any information about it?
Yeah, like I said, the issue that I think we were all facing in the Commission, and I think I can be quite honest with all of you, is that the budget negotiations next year they took more than expected. Finally, of course, we had good news because finally, some of these budgets were considerably increased. But of course, the bad news is that now we are running and fighting against the clock to be on time. What's essentially happening now behind the scenes is that the Creative Europe Steering Committee is also deciding on the annual work programs. I cannot possibly give you a very specific date, but we really aim to have the first calls from Creative Europe out in, I would say, late spring. So yeah, possibly in May, but please don't quote me on that. It's more a wishful thinking in this regard. Yes, but like I said, we're really struggling now to and working fast. But there's of course the political considerations, and all these programs have to be validated by a number of stakeholders before they can actually be unveiled.
Thank you. I think all of us are hungry of new projects. So please do monitor what's going on, as Maciej said. And as well, in our discussions, mainly with academia, we had a question which I would like to address to Tomasz, which is much more focused on technological aspects of digitalization. Well, we've been thinking, what is your opinion? Is it possible to have one access point, I mean, some sort of data aggregator, to digitalize cultural heritage in the whole Europe? And to what extent Europeana meet that kind of requirements? Could you elaborate a little bit on it?
Well, it depends on what kind of data I think you are talking about, because of course there are different, so to say, types of data, right? You can think of metadata, and this is what Europeana does really good, and then they do perform well in this aspect. There is also a matter of, for instance, textual content, right? Or the content itself. I mean, the presentation formats that are available across the Europe in various repositories or digital libraries or digital museums or galleries and so on. And that would be already, I would say, a challenge to really try to aggregate and somehow bring together these kind of resources. And then there is also, you know, the third part, so to say, of this equation, in the sense that we also have our cultural heritage institutions or other institutions that take care about the cultural heritage assets. They have also so-called master files, so the source data that is really, you know, high quality, but also large in terms of volume, data volume. So I mean, this would be even more challenging in my opinion. That's why I think there is also a need to really think about the models that use so to say local processing models, distributed processing models, which can, you know, bring some large scale processing in place. Yeah, that would be my general answer, but yeah, it's not so straightforward, I would say.
Thank you very much. From Gabi Lombardo. EOCC has not around cool heritage, as this is recognized as an important. Maciej, do you have any answer for it? Can you hear us, Maciej? Because we can't hear you.
Yes, yes. I think possibly, yeah, possibly Marita would be a better placed person to answer it. I mean, what I can add more as a general answer, it also links to the previous question on kind of mainstreaming of culture heritage in different, you know, other clusters of Horizon Europe other than Cluster 2. Of course, you know, this is, you know, in a way we all are doing in the Commission actually this work on kind of making sure that culture and cultural heritage is mainstreamed in different, let's say, EU initiatives. So in this sense, in this case also, you know, specifically the European Open Science Cloud, for instance. But, you know, as is the case with many of such initiatives, you know, they are also governed by a number of entities. So, you know, I think in the case of the cloud, it's of course also the member states, the research community. So, you know, in many cases, there is also a need for kind of advocating and I would say lobbying, in fact, if you know, there is a specific need to have this or that sector represented. So, of course, in this sense, we are fully on board as DG Education, Youth, Sport and Culture to always have cultural heritage kind of available in different EU initiatives, but it's not always only on our side. And there is always a need for I would say, voices coming from different stakeholders and different levels of governance. But yeah, I can only answer in this general way.
Thank you. And now, thank you for all your presentations. And now we are just about to move to the next session. I would like to thank you very much, and I will give the floor to Mr. Tomasz, who is the main organizer of the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Mariusz, for leading the discussion and taking us through this panel with really touching on opportunities that we have seen from both Marita and Maciej. So I think we all agree that definitely we are all very hungry and waiting for the more details and opening of the calls. So fingers crossed for all of that. That's definitely important. And as we have also actually experienced some challenges with sort of the processing of the data over the internet and with our connections. So this is a sort of a daily basis today. I think with this, I think we can move to the second panel, where we might actually learn a little bit more on how these opportunities and challenges are actually implemented in a more daily lives and the sort of actions that are being taken by some of the stakeholders that we decided to invite to the panel. And with this, I will give the floor to Justyna Kramarczyk, a colleague of mine at the PolSCA office, who will be moderating the panel with the participation of the representative of the Polish Academy of Sciences, the National Library in Poland, and the Antwerp Center for Digital Humanities and Literary Criticism. Justyna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tomasz. I hope that you hear me well. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all excellent speakers and such wide, diverse audience from all over Europe. I'm glad to be chairwoman of the second session, during which we all learn why it's worth it to be involved and how to be more engaged in different projects, actions, or initiatives on digitization of cultural heritage. In the next 50 minutes, I hope that we will get some unique, I'm sure that we will get some unique, practical, and useful insights from those who have already done it, and what is more important, who have done it successfully. So do not hesitate to ask your question and to take this webinar as a great opportunity to ask your question to our speakers. So as the schedule of the event is very tight, let me introduce briefly our first speaker, Mr. Maciej Eder, who is the director of the Institute of the Polish Language of the Polish Academy of Sciences, also vice chair of the Cost Action Distant Reading, and former co-secretary of the Alliance of Digital Humanities organization. What I found particularly interesting, Mr. Eder said that for him, the field of digital humanities is linked to team spirit, inclusiveness, and multidisciplinary collaboration. So in the view of this, I'm happy that you are with us today. And Mr. Eder, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thanks for this great introduction. I will say a few words about cultural heritage from a point of view of the end user, if I can say so. Or, the question I'm going to address is how we can take advantage of the already existing digitized collections. So I will start sharing my screen. I hope you can see it already. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Okay. Once more, I need to make it visible once more.
Now it's coming up.
Thank you so much. So I come from the Institute of Polish Language at the Polish Academy of Sciences, which has always been for many years, if not decades, inclined towards lexicography, doing those multi-volume big dictionaries of Old Polish, of Polish dialects, of also medieval Latin, different language resources turned into those large dictionaries. Right, and we've got like 10 of them running, but 15 or more preserved in a form of, well, not very much digitized, but handwritten index cards. Handwritten index cards that you use to compile the entries of the dictionaries. And these are millions, like 10 or 12 millions of those cards are being held at our institute, and they have been digitized in terms of the digital copies being made. So we've got the pictures of those 12 million cards. But now the question is, this is a beautiful collection, but it's flat, it's unstructured. You have no access to particular index cards without, screening them manually. So the question we wanted to address is, can we use modern technologies, modern AI technologies, including deep learning, neural networks, convolutional networks, recurrent networks, and so on, to decipher the content of that, right? So one of the projects we are conducting here at the Institute, and we have arrived already at the working prototype of this approach, is to read those cards, to take every single card one at a time. It's of course millions, but we have time. We can wait for 2 or 3 weeks to have this task completed. So the idea was and still is to take one card at a time, to cut off the head word, because that's what we're really interested in. That's what makes the structure of this collection. So out of the card, we cut off the head word, and we apply this AI technology, this neural networks, to decipher the head word, which is the handle to be linked to the electronic version of the dictionary. So because of having that, we now can link automatically from the already existing dictionaries to the archives, and also in the case of the dictionaries that are not already complete, we can link it to the raw data, to the raw manuscript, handwritten index cards. So that's how this digitization can be approached. But because not only is this about making a photocopies, but also of reading, of transforming it to a readable, computer-readable format. And as you have already realized, I'll be talking today about text analysis rather than pictures, rather than images. Even if we start with images, the final product being a text. And if it comes to the text analysis, that's the main field that we are conducting here at the Institute by taking advantage of textual data, digitized textual data, in order to trace some interesting stylistic similarities. And the second project I want to cover very briefly, it's a tiny thing. In the 15th century, there appeared the first translation of the Bible into Polish, known as Queen Sofia's Bible, Biblia Królowej Zofii, which was held at the monastery of Sarospatak in Hungary, but then disappeared after World War II. But fortunately enough, we've got a photocopy of it. We've got a facsimile, so we could digitize it, and we could prepare a critical edition back in the 70s, 1970s. And because of having this critical edition, we can now use this electronic text to address the questions of, for example, how many translators were involved in creating this Bible. So having done that, having digitize this Bible, we can use again advanced machine learning techniques to discover if there are any switchovers or takeovers from one translator to another, and then different colors of that. This is the entire text of the Bible, and as we move on through the text, we can discover different takeovers of the colors, which indicate different styles within the Bible. So we have just discovered that not one, but probably 4 translators were involved back in the 15th century in the process of translating this Bible. But so far I'm talking about just one text, one single text. And what about having digitized thousands of texts, if not thousands of texts? And here we arrive at the Distant Reading Cost Action project, a project which of which we are a part. And this is one of the outcomes of this project, is to build an infrastructure in terms of preparing a corpus of at least 2,500 full-size novels, very precisely transcribed or digitized and made available in machine-readable form, in order to make large-scale analysis. For example, just to show you one type of this kind of analysis, this is not novels, this is Shakespeare. And a question: if different genres of Shakespeare, romances, tragedies, comedies, poetry, and so on, if they come together, if they show some similarities. We have no time right now to cover the the actual outcome of this picture. This is just to provide an appetizer how this large-scale analysis might look like. And the question is, to which extent, for example, the Tempest, that's the Tempest, the last work by Shakespeare, to which extent it's distinct stylistically or thematically, as you can see in this picture. As I said, I'll be happy to say more about that in a Q&A session, not to overwhelm you with the results right now. So the question is, what if we take 2,500 novels or 2,500 plays, tragedies and comedies. And here we arrive at the final projects I want to cover today, which is a computer literary studies infrastructure Horizon 2020 projects that we have just started. Like a couple of weeks ago, we started a new project which will be based on this cost action outcome, but this time it will cover not only the novels, but also the novels, meaning prose, but also poetry, but also drama, in large collections throughout Europe. So the idea of this project is to connect all the possible texts that are created in different countries, in different European countries, in order to do some large-scale analysis. I think this is enough to make you, at a glance, some insight of what we're doing here at the Institute. And should you have any questions, I will be very happy to address them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eder. Thank you for giving us the flavor, what the text analysis is and how to use AI and digitalization of literature collections. So now we move to, now I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Sonia Wronkowska, fantastic woman of many talents, I have to admit, musicologist, librarian, computer scientist, and business technology analyst, involved in several digitization, IT, and digital humanities projects. Sonia represents the National Library of Poland, where she is the Director's Plenipotentiary for Digital Development. Since 2020, she has been also leading an IT project in the National Library of Norway. That is why the floor will be given now directly to Norway.
Thank
Sonia?
Thank you very much for the introduction. Can you see my screen and can you hear me well?
Yeah, everything is perfect.
Great, thanks. And so the National Library of Poland started digitization activities around 15 years ago. The strategy, formed in 2013, highlighted mass digitization with the aim of long-time preservation and user-friendly presentation of the resources in Polona Digital Library. During the years, we shaped the organization in a way that is putting digital processes in the core of our activities, as it is our duty as a national library to preserve and made available the Polish written heritage along with the best possible way available through the current technology. We are constantly working on the development of both back office services for managing the digital collections by the employees, as well as on front office services as the digital library for our end users. We are working as well on the security of our storage and the quality of data we are providing. Our IT infrastructure serves several Polish heritage institutions, so they don't need to create their own from scratch. The digitization as well as the software development in the National Library of Poland is possible on a mass scale because of the projects funded by European Union. During our project Patrimonium that ended a year ago, we were able to create a digitization lab of 50 state-of-art digitization devices and digitize approximately 2,000 library documents daily. That equals 85,000 scans daily, approximately. And in 3 years during this project I mentioned, we made available to our readers 1 million digital objects. And it was a significant boost that allowed us to become one of the leading digitization players in public sector worldwide. Although we already got used to the project approach, I would say the bureaucracy around the European Union funds is something still challenging for heritage institutions. Maybe not for us anymore, but for smaller ones we are in contact with. Also, the limited time frame, 3 years in most grants available for Polish institutions, is a significant challenge in planning an IT project where the tender for software development needs to be organized. The third challenge is obviously the copyright that create obstacles in digitizing, processing, and making available contemporary cultural heritage, which is crucial, for instance, for natural language processing initiatives. Our main product is Polona Digital Library, polona.pl, where you can find almost 3.5 million digital objects, so digital library documents from several Polish institutions. Just to mention the highlights, we have a very open policy towards public domain objects. We have a IIIF conformant interoperability, open API, web accessibility on a high level. And right now, with the objective of the better accessibility in mind for both humans and machines, we set up a research and development project aiming in facilitation of machine learning to recognize the text of documents that cannot be treated with standard OCR software, namely early printed books and manuscripts, to make them searchable, full text searchable. We wouldn't be in a place we are if not for the collaborative work. It is much easier and much more needed right now in the era of digital libraries, so to say. We collaborate with other heritage institutions on joint digitization projects. The example can be a Krakow Jagiellonian Library, University Library, the second biggest Polish library with whom we apply for European Union funds together. We offer our back office and front office services in software as a service model to other Polish GLAM institutions. Therefore, we secure the written heritage that is not a part of our holdings. Then we cooperate with software houses for IT projects. We are happy to support research projects as an institutional partner, which helps us to get the needs of our potential users better, to understand the needs of the users better. Right now, most of all, we are interested in partnerships with digital humanities projects. We take part in international standardization consortiums like IIIF, the International Image Interoperability Framework I already mentioned, to share the knowledge and know-how. We benefit from and try to contribute to open source community as well. And last but not least, we act as a competence center for library digitization in Poland and for digital preservation in Central Europe, which means we help other GLAM institutions in organizing digitization, building infrastructure, apply for funds, etc. Thanks to the national and international cooperation, we fully understand the heritage institutions are dealing with the same resources, but we're approaching it in various ways during the phase of digitization boom, so to say. Only now we can try to design more standardized approaches to identify the common ground for all the digitization activities around the world. An example could be common data models or formats for exchanging data. Finally, we reach synergy not only through institutional cooperation, but also through interacting with our users. We are shaping our services, having their needs in mind. After 15 years of digitization, we can observe the trends that have passed and new that appeared. The core issues of digitization, long-time preservation, and presentation in digital libraries are pretty well solved, I would say, and standardized by the international community. The future is for opening up the institutional silos and allowing the data to be flowing, to be used across applications, thanks to the interoperability, for example. And we are in the middle of a great shift towards treating cultural artifacts as data that can be processed in numerous ways, for example, with the use of machine learning nowadays. And libraries have an interesting role in it. Protect the sacred integrity of the document, the library document, and the work contained in it, but represent it digitally in a way that will allow users to just play with the data and use it. And of course, we have to continue digitization on a mass scale with a high quality. And we also see our role to support smaller institutions in Poland, in Central Europe, institutions with unique resources to do the same we do, to digitize. In the end, each of us, GLAM institutions, GLAM agents, is a node in the graph of distributed cultural and scientific data. And of course, the more nodes there are, the more connections there are in the graph, the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for this interesting visually presentation and for remind us, I think all of us, about the role of the users. And I think that I really appreciate your remark concerning the role of synergies, collaboration, and also infrastructure in the process of digitization. So thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Mike Kestemont. I believe our neighbor, because Mike lives in Brussels. So, so we moved from Norway to Brussels. Mike is a spokesperson of the Antwerp Center for Digital Humanities and Literary Criticism, and associate research professor in the Department of Literature at the University of Antwerp. Mr. Kestemont, Mike specializes in computational text analysis for the digital humanities, currently with a strong focus on historic literature. So, Mike, I will pass the virtual microphone to you right now.
Hi, hello, good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my slides and hope that you can all see this. So good morning. I was asked to say a few things on ACDC, our Antwerp Center for Digital Humanities and Literary Criticism, which is a research group at the University of Antwerp, where we focus on the application of computational methodologies across the humanities, but especially in literature. We are a large group, over 35 members from multiple nationalities. We operate in different languages, and we see that multilingualism as a clear asset. And for our research, we try to acquire funding at various levels, going from the local city level to the European level. And we have a special connection, I might say, to Poland, and especially to the group of Maciej Eder, who is also here today, and with whom we currently have also a mobility project going that is a joint initiative between FWO in Flanders and the Polish Academy of Science. So today I can't survey all of the activities that we do, but I wanted to introduce you to two projects which I think are representative of the work that we do. If you're interested, you're always welcome to join one of the summer schools that we organize each year, or get yourself acquainted with the scientific community, DUF, that we coordinate about digital humanities in Flanders. And we also have a platform lecture series, and you're always welcome to join one of these talks. The first project that I wanted to pitch today is called the InSight Project, which is an acronym for Intelligent Neural Systems as Integrated Heritage Tools, which is a collaboration between 3 Belgian universities and 2 museum clusters in Brussels that you might have heard of, the Royal Museums of Fine Arts and the Royal Museums of Art and History. And this is a project that is funded at the federal level in Belgium, which is a bit unusual because in fact most of the scientific research in Belgium is funded at the regional level. So this is an interesting opportunity for us. What we try to do in this project is capitalize on these recent advances in artificial intelligence that most of you have heard of by now, especially in natural language processing, so language technology and computer vision. And what we try to do is help these museum clusters with the curation and further enrichment of their digital collections. A case study that I wanted to highlight is one in what they call music iconography, which is the the study of the representation, the artistic representation of musical topics in art. So it could be depictions of instruments, music making, portraits of artists, and that kind of thing, which is really a field that lies at the intersection of art history and musicology. It's interesting because it's a field in which there hasn't been much computational work yet. So there's a lot of advances that we can still make. And in this little sub-project, what we try to do is apply computer vision to detect musical instruments in the visual arts, in unrestricted visual arts, even going from paintings to statues, etc. And what this basically comes down to is two elements. So first of all, what you have to do in these paintings, for instance, is detect the instrument by drawing a bounding box around it. And then in a second stage, what you want to do is classify it. For instance, in this example, what you want to do is first isolate this bounding box and then say that the depicted instrument here in this Frans Hals painting is a lute. So we obtained interesting, promising results with this. But only for the more frequent classes. And what we see is that lutes and harps and violins, the technology works pretty well for that, but we still have lots of issues trying to detect more obscure instruments that are depicted much less frequently in cultural history. What is interesting about this case study is that it has a practical application, because this technology now allows you to recognize these instruments in for instance, paintings. But the technology isn't perfect, and the detector also made a lot of errors. And I include a couple of examples there in the bottom row on this slide. And there you see that often baby Jesus, in this case, was tagged as a musical instrument, which I think is a really interesting result, because apparently, iconographically speaking, there are resemblances between the way people carry baby Jesus, often that's Mother Mary, of course, and the way people are being depicted holding musical instruments. There's the same kind of reference or this intimate body language. So that's what I like about digital humanities research, I think. And what this shows is that this kind of research doesn't only have a practical relevance, it allows you to do stuff that we weren't able to do before, but it also can give you more insights and surprising insights into art history, in this case, for instance. And I think that that kind of serendipity is really something that we should cherish. The second project that I wanted to pitch today is from a completely different context. It's about the Middle Ages, and more specifically, the Middle Ages in the Low Countries, the part of the world that I am from. This is a project that is funded by the Flemish Agency for Science, and it focuses on a monastery, a Carthusian monastery, not that far from Brussels, which is called Herne. You will not have heard about this, but it's pretty important in the Low Countries, because in the second half of the 14th century, it was a real hotspot, you could say, of Middle Dutch literature. And it's in fact pretty famous because of the figure of the so-called Bible translator of 1360. And what people like to say is that this person was responsible for the first Bible translation in Europe. So I have to nuance that a little. So this person would have made the first full Bible translation in prose into a European vernacular, which is kind of special. Now, what is very intriguing about the Carthusians as an order is that they were a silent order. So they typically were not allowed to speak, only on specific moments during the week. But that doesn't mean that these monks didn't collaborate amongst themselves. There was, in fact, quite a bit of collaboration when they were producing books, but they weren't allowed to speak. So what you see is that they recorded all of their discussions in the margins of these books. And this is pretty uncommon. So the level of commentary that you find in these books is amazing. And if you read through these commentaries, it's almost like you're there again, that you're taking part in this discussion. What we try to do in this project is basically try to reconstruct this medieval library, because now these manuscripts are being kept in libraries scattered all over the world. And we try to unite them again in one virtual digital place. Very happy that IIIF was already mentioned in one of the previous presentations. I really think that this is a breakthrough technology that cannot be overfunded in many ways, because this is really changing the way we interface with cultural heritage nowadays. The second aspect or technology that we're applying here was also already mentioned, which is handwritten text recognition. This is also a technology that's changing the way I think we do scholarship. I'm very excited about this. And what we want to do, of course, is not only bring together the pixels again or the images of these manuscripts, but we really want to give the public access, but also scientists access to the actual text that is contained in these manuscripts. And handwritten text technology allows us to do that nowadays. I think this is the most significant revolution that I will see in my career, because 10 years ago, nobody would have believed that this was possible. And I do think now that we have these possibilities at the tips of our fingers. What we aim to achieve is this virtual reuniting of the materials. And we also want to do this handwritten text recognition to then do a statistical analysis of these materials and analyze the scribal practice that existed in this monastery. And for that, we will use technologies like the ones that were just presented by Machi, and which I hope that we will also be able to collaborate on in the very near future. So that's it. Thanks for your attention. Feel free to check out our website, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mike, for this very interesting, very, I think, significant presentation for us. It's good to hear that manuscripts, and it means our past, is in a good hands, and that the progress is so visible right now in terms of the period of 10 years. It's really incredible. I think that during this short session, we already covered many topics, and we covered the involvement of libraries, of museums, also of different cultural institutions. We touched many topics from the literature through music till art and paintings. So I'm really thankful for all the speakers. And I would like to move to questions. We have some questions from the audience. So maybe I will start with the first question, which is already answered by Professor Eder. The question was, what is the IEI process work in terms of the Tempest of the Shakespeare? It was the project, if I remember well. Professor, could you or would you like to elaborate on this question? Would you like to add something to
Well,
your
yes,
answer?
totally. Not to go too much into the detail, this was just a toy example of how text analysis, machine learning technologies might look like. And the general idea is that if you think of style, you usually think of the words that you elaborate on, that you very consciously use, right? And you can detect them using, for example, topic modeling machine learning technology. And there's a different area of style that you are not very much conscious about. This is the usage of the function words, of this linguistic glue, the words such as the, of, and, in, upon, and so on and so on. And the good question is if those two levels of language correlate, right? And here the question was if the Tempest, which is of course different stylistically, we can see that. But the question was if also at this deeper level, stylistic level, you can see the correlation with it's being different. So I'll be very happy to say more, but I'm not sure this will be of any interest to everyone here in this room. But there was some topic modeling LDA technique combined with SBM classification, and the classification itself, Mike was also talking about classification, was the key thing here, right? How the machine classifies the similarities, how it finds some texts being more and less similar to other texts. And that was the toy outcome of for example.
Thank you very much. We encourage to contact Professor Eder. I believe that he would like to give the interested person more details. The next question from the audience will go to Sonia Wronkowska. First of all, there is a comment on the chat that the Polish digitized libraries are really great, and we can find many information. So the role of the library and the shape of the library is different right now, and they are really useful in terms of users, and they're user friendly as well. But the question is the question concerning more rights, and I think kind of intellectual property. How do you deal with artistic rights in terms of photography?
So first of all, thank you for your kind words about the functional aspect of the Polona Digital Library. And addressing the second question about the copyright, we are actually very careful when it comes to the copyright. What I mentioned also at the beginning of the presentation, that we kind of transformed the organization to serve better the processes of digitization. And along with those transformation, we assigned a special unit section that is responsible for checking the copyright and making sure which resources we can actually put online available for all the users, which are the public domain for 100%, which has some issues, maybe are orphaned work and stuff like that. So we have specialists who are dealing with that, who are interpreting the copyright, the Polish copyright, the European guidelines for it. But we are very, very careful about it, and we are making available only for a public user only items, works for which we are sure, 100% sure that they belong to public domain. And this is our main aim when it comes to digitization. We prioritize digitizing public domain items because we know that we can make them available for our end users. Of course, we do some digitization of the copyrighted materials as well, and they are made available only on the special computers on the territory of the libraries in Poland. Not only the National Library, but the whole, like all the public libraries, almost all the public libraries has its kind of computer that allows you to access the items. So that's I think it's covers the question.
Thank you, Sonia. Maybe Mike or Maciej, would you like to add something on this? Because I think this is the issue concerning all the projects. I don't know if you want to elaborate, if you want to give your insight to this.
Yes,
Mike, go for it.
Yeah, there's an interesting clash there between intellectual rights and, on the other hand, the transparency that we aim for. And so in this specific project that I'm involved in, so I fall under the Belgian intellectual rights, which are pretty liberal. So as a researcher, you can do pretty much anything as long as what you do is meant for scientific purposes. But we work a lot with people in computer science, and their transparency or the exchange of data is really important. So the solution that we have there is that we publish our data sets on a repository called Zenodo, which I'm a big fan of. But people have to request access. So that means that I can do a bit of gatekeeping and screen people to see whether they're actually researchers. And that is, I think, a good way for me to exchange data that is protected by copyright, restricted to the context of scientific collaboration. But there is an interesting clash there between the rights of the photographers, of the artists, of the institutions, and the sort of transparency and open science that we aim for nowadays.
Yeah, and same goes for the texts, especially, contemporary texts, which are obviously copyrighted. So that's the reason I personally, but this also applies to Mike, who did some stuff on the 13th century monastic writers and so on, right? I also try to pick some texts from the past, but again, these are subject to copyright because the contemporary editors have edited them. And the question is to which extent we can just drag out the text itself and dropping the footnotes, the commentaries, all the stuff that has been added by the editors. And you know the law is sort of catching up. It's not in line with modern technologies, and this is something to be sorted out. But as Mike rightly says, there is a fashion right now in the humanities to switch to this open science paradigm, to share your data as much as possible via open access repositories such as GitHub or Zenodo. And the question we are trying to approach with our team is to which extent we can use derivative formats. So rather than sharing the original text, can we just share the table of frequencies or some other layers, meta layers added to the text, to not to break the law, but still to make the data set available. So that's the direction we are going to explore right now. To which extent we can just extract the numbers from the text and to give them via the open access technologies.
Thank you very much. I see one more question from audience. There is a more detailed question, more specific question addressed to Mike and to Maciej. Are you applying for becoming a research infrastructure via ESFRI, which is European Strategic Forum on Infrastructures? Can you?
Well, yes, that's a great suggestion, and thanks for very much for that one. As far as I remember, Professor Zalewska is a member of this board for this ESFRI thing, and she's a nuclear physicist. So I don't know what is the place of the humanities in there, or cultural heritage people. I have to check it out. Yeah, that's a great suggestion, especially in the context of this new Horizon 2020 project of building an infrastructure for computational literary studies that I am a PI of. So this is indeed something to explore. But life is too short to know about every single initiative. So thanks for the suggestion. Appreciate it.
Okay. Great. I think we are running out of time, but let me ask the last question to sum up somehow this presentation, also kind of discussion which we already had. I would like to ask all the speakers I would like to ask you for indicating, first of all, the barrier which you already experience in terms of interdisciplinary collaboration. The second one, it would be great to give us more insight on the added value of this collaboration. And the third thing, the last thing, how you can encourage different institutions, different actors to be involved in the process of digitalization. So three short answers concerning the barrier, which from your perspective, what is the biggest barrier? What is the biggest difficulty in terms of collaboration? What is the added value? And one tip and trick how to be more engaged. I don't know who wants to start.
I can start to encourage everyone else. So when it comes to this barrier, a couple of years ago, we've been involved in a very, very risky and tricky project, collaborating with organic chemistry specialists in order to apply some corpus linguistics method into chemistry, right? And you know, the outcomes of that projects were not that as big as we thought they would be. But even though the problem that we are facing at the beginning of even before we started applying for this grant, was that there is no common grant, there is no no place where organic chemists can speak to a linguist, right? So quite by chance, we met in a corridor at one of the grant agencies, and that was we almost mistakenly bumped one to another, and that was the beginning of the collaboration. But there is no forum for this transdisciplinary research, with an exception. This exception being digital humanities, which brings people from different disciplines, from computer sciences, from literary sciences, from history, from linguistics, and so on and so on. And that's the reason I like so much those digital humanities conferences, that there's this melting pot of this multidisciplinary insight into the thing. So when it comes to added value, well, there's plenty of those. To just restrict myself to this organic chemistry project itself, we proposed a new measure of keyword analysis that could be used in this chemical organic chemistry context. I'm not sure to which extent they are really using that, but that's something that the humanities could offer to those real sciences, right? So the added value is obviously there. And the third question, I will pass it. I'm talking too much, so I will pass it to Sonia and Mike.
So I can follow up. I was also thinking about the barrier as the barrier of finding a common language, and I think then that IT modeling, the designing some data models, which is a part of software engineering, is actually a very good common language for interdisciplinary projects, or even for two institutions who are trying to reach the same goals, but in the past they were approaching it like from different sides with different know-how. So I think it's very good to have a brainstorm with some modeling to find a common denominator for the issues that are on the both sides. And added value is, of course, that talking about the GLAM community, we've been asking ourselves the same question for a long period of time. So if we are teaming up, it's a great possibility that some other institutions already find a solution or answer to the questions which are common for all of us. And my tip for how to be involved, I'm very great fan of international communities like IIIF, like the emerging AI for LAM, so artificial intelligence for libraries, archives, and museums. This is a great place to start, to meet people, to see what's going on in the world, and to try to apply the same in our case, in our project, in our institution.
Mike,
so one of the barriers that I see is that digital heritage is still something very new, and we don't know how to do it, I think. So we are implementing stuff while not knowing what ultimately the best practice will be. So we're building the plane as we fly, so to speak. And because things are changing so rapidly, I find that a challenge. So the fact that we're not sure what we're doing, which is good, good, but it is a barrier. And then as a tip or a hint in general, what I always say is that I think that humanities scholars have to learn how to code. So they don't have to, give up on their background. But I think that learning how to code is stimulating. It's intellectually satisfying. And I also think that it can help you communicate with people outside of your own domain. And I appreciate Sonia's point about software engineering being, in fact, a good common language that we might develop as an interface to other fields. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was great to hear this final message. I think that now we are more hungry, as Professor Dzięglewski said, but also more aware how to do it, and even who we can ask if we want to do it, if you want to be part of the process. Thank you very much. And now I will give the floor to Tomasz. We will move to the closing remarks. Yeah, thank you very much. Tomasz, floor is yours.
Thank you, Justina, and all colleagues and speakers and participants of that panel for this, well, very inspiring talks and discussions. It was really pleasant to hear your stories and interventions and the questions and comments on the chat. On my behalf, my colleagues and co-organizers of this event, I would really like to warmly thank you to all of you for this active participations. To our guest who opened this meeting today with this very heartwarming keynote speech, through all the interventions that we have seen and the moderations through our guests, and to all the participants. I'm really glad that all of you, 100 people, have actually continued to listen and to engage with all of you, to share those experiences and to learn. And I think, but I'm just looking through some of my notes, what actually is really sticking out is the collaboration that have appeared in so many of your interventions. And I think this is a sort of an example of how we can start to collaborate and how to start to engage. I mean, well, because of the COVID, because of the times we are living, well, this is how we can do it. Many things are happening digitally, and we might still wait a little bit before we will be able to meet in person in maybe a lecture room. So to have to sip a tea and a coffee together, shake hands and just get to know each other. But until then, I mean, we still will have to deal with it. And I think this is great that we had this opportunity to have you here and to learn about what is coming up. And I think that was really great to hear from Maciej and Marita on what we can expect in the Horizon Europe and the Creative Europe programs. I think this is very important that we, well, you, the researchers, and also representatives of the cultural and creative industries and communities will engage together. And in spite of all difficulties, challenges, and obstacles, but with this feeling of the added value that you can work and you can do something together. So I really encourage you to do so, to be active. And I think we're in a very good time. So this event is actually happening before the open calls and so on. And I think there will be a lot of events and a lot of possibilities to really get engaged and be more interactive, a lot of networking events, brokerages, and this sort of events also that will be delivered directly by the European Commission, but across your networks and probably through your NCPs and the national contact points in your, well, every corner of Europe, you will have a lot of opportunities to learn more about the really funding opportunities, but it will be a good chance to meet colleagues and possible peers and collaborators, as Maciej just mentioned, that sometimes you can bump into someone completely out of blue. It might happen in a digital world as well. So we encourage you to be active, be there, speak up, show up, what you're doing. I think this is all possible with the digital technologies that we have. We do encourage you to do so. What we will do after this, as we will just in a moment close the meeting, we'll definitely share with you all the presentations that we have. You will get the contacts to the speakers, so you can also reach out to them directly. And within a couple of days, we'll also provide you with a short summary with the key messages of that event that will be also supplemented with the recording of the event. So if you have missed something, you will be able to still go back to this and just watch it and again. So that will be a sort of a preserving that event for your future activities. Well, once again, I would really like to welcome, to thank you very warmly for your time and engagement. And I wish you all the best for, well, not just for today, not just for the next weeks and months, but in all of your sort of engagements that you're doing. Well, fingers crossed, and for you and your peers for, well, a good spirit of collaboration in the next couple of years, at least as it comes to the current EU funding that we have on the table. So thank you and have a good day. Well, that's it. Thank you very much.